everyone will tell you if you moved to Los Angeles in 2004, you needed a car to get around. And I was determined to prove them wrong. And I biked everywhere. It's important for me to be able to talk about my experiences. Well, one of the biggest things that I've been advocating for is swapping the parking lane with the bike lane. Larger bike lanes, actual protections, concrete barriers, planters, separated bike lanes. These are what we see in other cities where they take bicycle infrastructure seriously. So how do we move from a car-centric culture to a walkable, bikeable community? For me, one of the strongest things I can do is make sure good people are appointed to that transportation commission. Hey, if this is something you're passionate about, this is something you're experienced in, there's 2 seats right now open on that 7-member board. Parking minimums are like the bane of my existence when it comes to zoning. It's so hilarious to me how you can drive by 100 fast food restaurants and there's so much parking and everyone's in the drive-through anyways.
That's true.
What are we doing?
I didn't even think about that.
You got to build things where the people are so they don't have to drive. So what we build and where we build it, 99% of that decision is done by your local elected members. People don't think about that.
Welcome to Bike Talk on KPFK live stream. Here with Lindsay and Nick. Lindsay, talk to us.
Yeah. So this morning, I got to interview the guy who was the main writer of the transportation section of Drawdown, which is this new book. I don't know if you guys have seen it. It's a New York Times bestseller. Drawdown, the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And they basically go through every single thing we can do. It's like 100 things. Solar, wind, bikes, and they calculate how much it can draw down and how much it costs. And I guess scientists all over the world they've adopted the phrase drawdown. So people aren't saying, the Paris climate goals, which is like ephemeral and like, oh, what? And they're saying, okay, how are we going to draw down? So they put this word into our vocabulary, and he's from Trinidad, and he's just this expert researcher, and he was Ryan Allard. It was really, so it'll be great, I think.
What does drawdown mean? Does it mean like draw carbon out of the atmosphere?
Exactly. And so they calculated it in gigawatts so that you could really put a price tag on it, but also rank it, because people don't always understand the difference between, how much impact can solar have? How much impact can wind have? And by the way, it turns out that wind is like basically the best thing in terms
Really?
of, well, actually, no, you know what it is? Bikes are the best. I'm sorry. I should correct myself. Bikes are the best.
Hello.
This is Konstantine Anthony. You are a brand new city council member for the city of Burbank. And you are also a spokesperson for the Sunrise Movement, right? Like what's your role at the Sunrise Movement?
Well, I wouldn't say I'm a spokesperson. I was endorsed by the Sunrise Movement Los Angeles. I am a huge advocate of climate change, not for climate change, to fight climate change. I don't think I would have gotten their endorsement if I was a climate change advocate. But tackling climate change is, one of my top priorities, both in office and as a private citizen. There's much more I can do than just my one city, being a voice for change and for, grassroots movements across the country and across the world to really tackle climate change is an important work that I've been doing for years already. But yeah, I had a lot of interactions with Sunrise over the summer. Their endorsement meant a lot to me. I believe they were actually the second group to endorse me. So that came early on, and it sort of started, a movement of people jumping into my campaign. And, these young kids, they're literally young kids. That's the thing. It's like teenagers who are just tired of everyone older than us not doing anything. So it's really exciting to watch them, put their effort behind millennials and younger candidates to simply do the things that we grew up thinking that our elders were going to do. We all grew up watching Captain Planet and that kind of ideology permeate through our own understanding of the world. Yet here we are, 2021, and we're like, why are we still drilling for oil? Like, what are you doing? Anyway.
So I mean, the reason I guess that we kind of ended up that we have you on the show is we were discussing a couple of weeks ago Sunrise Movement and their policy, like their transportation policy, if they have one, or what it would be, and obviously it gets reflected in the type of candidates that they endorse. So for you and the city of Burbank, how do you see the city of Burbank fighting climate change through transportation policy?
Well, I will say there is a pretty good platform, a known platform that cities can do across the country, across the world, to tackle climate change at the local level. Like bigger stuff, like carbon tax and blocking fossil fuel purchases from other countries. That's a big federal thing. And then there's other stuff states can do, like banning offshore drilling and all that stuff. But really, when you look at local jurisdictions, cities and townships, there's very specific things that you can do to really, change the way you produce carbon emissions and just generate carbon into the air. The two biggest ones, obviously, is transportation, the way you build a city and the way you move people around, and the electrification of your power grid and how you build buildings and infrastructure based on that electrification. If every city in the world tackled those two issues at their core, then all the other stuff, the state laws, the federal laws, they would fall in line, because cities wouldn't be demanding giant interstate highways of automobiles to be built and billions and billions of gallons of crude oil needing to be purchased to move in so that you would drive your car everywhere. And then at the same time, you wouldn't have all of these pipelines trying to say, oh, well, we're going to heat the world with natural gas because it's better than coal. It's like, it's still a fossil fuel. Change the way you do it. Don't have coal-fired plants. Don't have natural gas-fired plants. Solar, wind, hydroelectric. Like, these are simple things that every city can start to buy into. So, like, I'll talk about the electrification first, because it's such a esoteric idea, because you got to think in terms of 25 and 50 years ahead. When you as a city buy your power, or when you negotiate contracts to buy power in the future, you're basically determining where you're getting your power from and how you build power plants. Prime example, so Burbank gets a lot of their power from a power plant in Utah. It's called the Intermountain Power Plant Project. And that is, generating power and transmitting it, hundreds and hundreds, thousands of miles back and forth and across all of California and Nevada, and, lots of other cities buy into that. And so one of the things you can do as the power user, as the consumer, because that's basically what we are, is demand something different from your supplier. Say, hey, I don't want coal energy. I don't want natural gas energy.
Is that a coal plant that's in Utah?
It is coal now, and the contract for the next 50 years is to switch it to natural gas, with a contract of reducing that over time to solar, possibly even wind or hydroelectric if it comes up, but mostly solar. And the problem with that is you're still rewarding them for that little bit of natural gas, and it's 2021. We don't need that, but it's cheaper because they've already done it, right? Because there's so many places that are already in motion that, oh, well, we have all this extra natural gas anyway, so we'll just sell you this and cheaper. And so the rate payers as a consumer, right? I want to pay less cents on the dollar for my heat. And in doing so, I'm buying the cheaper natural gas and waiting for them to switch it to solar. And so, one of the conversations you have to have as a city is talking to your consumers and saying, look, do you want to pay a little bit extra for your, electricity in the hopes that we stop the entire globe from boiling over and they're killing everybody? So like, that's a conversation you need to have. Or is there a way that a city can reduce that amount of money spent and take that burden on themselves and start to tax larger?
Yeah, like, can we reallocate money to convert? It's like asking people to pay more. That's almost political death right there, in a way. People just resist that as much as they can, or they sort of bemoan it, right? Like,
but you got to remember, like, in a city like Burbank, we have huge corporations that generate, use electricity generation nonstop, 24/7, and their electric bill is thousands and thousands times more than the average citizen. So, most cities, they just say, all right, we're going to change the rates across the board. But why do we have to stick with that system anymore? Why can't we give discounts to residential users? Why can't we have these higher using corporations, the one who are we've got companies in Burbank who made a killing during the pandemic. I mean, we've got Disney, we've got Amazon moving in, we've got Kaiser Permanente. These are, they made a lot of cash in the last 9 months. So why aren't we as a society saying, okay, all of you big time users, the ones who have made millions and millions of dollars over the last 50 years while we were using these fossil fuels, why don't you pay extra and then give everybody else a break so we can, deal with this inequality and then move towards solar energy faster? That's the conversation that the Sunrise kids are coming up with. They're saying, why do I have to pay extra?
Right. So have the bigger entities pay for most of it and leave the ratepayers or the regular Joes who, the residents, to pay less, is basically what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay.
And of course, there's always the question of why isn't the federal government just coming in with these subsidies? Like, that's a huge question.
Yeah.
Right.
Lindsay?
And I'm a big fan of the carbon tax. I have to be honest. I know it's very concontroversial, but I guess I feel like people would be very.
I have to leave. If you're a carbon tax fan, I'm sorry.
I think.
Wait, explain the carbon tax for our viewers really quick.
And actually, my kids, I have teenagers, and we went to Washington before COVID, and we advocated with a huge group for a carbon tax and dividend. It was really cute. They wanted to do it. And the idea is that you tax emissions, pollution, and then you take that money and you just write a check to people. So most people end up about the same. And you always, you try to compensate for anybody, hardship cases, et cetera, super rural situations. But to me, I guess I'd rather pay a tax on carbon than say sales tax or, pay income taxes, like stuff, so if I were to, I would take that tax shift.
Yeah, and that's definitely a way to change that burden. That's absolutely a useful way of looking at it, saying, look, if you're the person putting carbon into the air, why aren't you paying more? But we don't do that. We just say, well, you're using the energy and it doesn't matter where the energy is coming from. We're just going to charge you as a ratepayer. And I think that's two separate conversations. There's power and water as a utility. And then there's, well, how are you developing that utility and where is it coming from?
Yep. The beauty of also taxing carbon and electricity, because we all can use less of it, right? You can shut the lights off. You can run your dishwasher at night, right? Is that you can get out of it, which I like taxes that you can actually get out of, because it's a incentive for people to avoid the tax, right? And you actually don't want the tax. You just want people to stop using the carbon.
Right. And that's the kind, it's not necessarily, it's like a mix between luxury tax and a sin tax, right? Like, you don't want people to be doing this kind of thing, but if they really have to, you should charge them for it. So it's more like a model behavior kind of tax.
Yeah. And I, if you don't mind, I'd love to ask you about how you got so inspired about bikes.
So, I rode a bike as a kid, obviously, but I didn't really get into biking until I moved to Southern California. So I grew up in the East Bay, just outside of Oakland, a little town called Castro Valley. And, it's impossible to get around those small suburban towns on a bike. So I didn't really do much. And my parents had to drive me everywhere when I was a kid. And then the moment I turned 16, I took the family car and drove everywhere, right? So everywhere was car accessible when I was growing up. But then I first moved to Burbank, and then I moved to Hollywood, and I was a working actor for almost 10 years. And being a working actor, I was very poor. And so I found a way out of paying income tax by just not making income. So kudos. And I realized that if I wanted to really invest in my career, I needed to, take jobs that really didn't pay that much. That's the way the industry is. You take whatever you can get. So I couldn't afford to own a car. And everyone will tell you if you moved to Los Angeles in 2004, you needed a car to get around. And I was determined to prove them wrong. So for 8.5 years, I did not own an automobile. I never drove. I took the bus and the subway, and I biked everywhere. I know every bus line, every nook and cranny, every bike lane in the city of LA, and I have gone all over the place. And so for 8.5 years, that was my main mode of transportation. And wow, was it scary in some places, but also doable. Like, it was doable. And over the course of those 10 years, LA actually, improved their bike infrastructure. I saw the changes. I saw more buses with bike racks. I saw more bike racks on the street where you could park your bike. And it was a welcome change. And I learned a lot. And so now when I, talk about bikes and bicycle infrastructure, I understand what people are saying and I can advocate for it. And at the same time, if I'm talking to the people who are building the infrastructure, some of them have never ridden a bike more than 5 minutes. And so it's important for me to be able to talk about my experiences. Before I was a city council member, I was on the Burbank Transportation Commission, and I was there 3.5 years. I ended up becoming the chair of the commission, and a lot of my work there was advocating for bike lanes and bike safety. Just a couple of years ago, there was a man in Burbank, a longtime postal worker in the city of Burbank, who was in a bike lane, and he hit a door as someone was opening their door, and crashed into the street and passed away. And there was a bike lane, but it was not a protected bike lane. It was just paint on the road. And so, there's things that we can do and ways that we can make it safer.
Okay, because the big critique with bike lanes, those bike lanes are that they're door zone bike lanes, that they put you into a door zone. So is that something you're going to be working on moving forward in Burbank? Do you think there'd be a lot of opportunities to put in buffered bike lanes or protected bike lanes?
Well, one of the biggest things that I've been advocating for is swapping the parking lane with the bike lane. I mean, that is just the most rudimentary way to protect. Obviously, larger bike lanes, actual protections. And I'm not just talking plastic bollards, that can flap around when you hit them, but like concrete barriers, planters, that kind of thing, raised, even separated bike lanes. These are what we see in other cities where they take bicycle infrastructure seriously. But, Burbank, to a large degree, and most of Southern California, is very much a car culture. We have the old classic cars roadshow here in Burbank, and we have Bob's Big Boy, and every Friday night you can go down to Bob's Big Boy, and everyone's got their old 1950s Chevys out there, and they're honking and roaring, and it's such a throwback to what people perceive as a golden era of driving. And in reality, it's because the population was so low. There was no density, and you could drive very safely. I mean, even the speed limits were much lower back then. They didn't have seatbelts. And so trying to think about, this giant steel tank taking up most of the lane, cruising down the highway, when in reality, the population density has increased so much just in Southern California alone, not to mention the rest of the world, that it's just not feasible anymore. I mean, gas was so cheap back then, and now we know gas is not the way we should be powering our vehicles. So how do we move from a car-centric culture to a walkable, bikeable community culture? You know, we don't want people separating themselves with steel and glass and cutting themselves off from the interaction of day-to-day life. We want that community.
So what do you think in terms of the city council? Like, how could you put together a sort of a motion or a plan to transform Burbank's streets? I mean, there are a lot of people in Burbank planning that are actually pretty bike friendly, in my opinion. I used to intern there, and I think they run into a lot of resistance from the city council. I would hear that sometimes when I was working there. What could you do? Like, how does the makeup of the city council look? Like, would you be able to build a coalition that could get us more bike infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure in Burbank? Do you think that's looking good right now, or are you going to have to do some work to put together a coalition?
Well, that is a very interesting topic, because I'll explain this to you, and hopefully a bunch of other people from around the country can understand it. When you work for a municipality, whether it's city or state or federal office, the people who are hired staff, the people who work for you, if they work for the government in general, maybe not your personal staff, but if they work for the government in general, they're not allowed to have a political opinion. They're just supposed to present you with the facts, positives, minuses, what's best practices, what's been done in the past. And then the governing bodies, it needs to decide where to go with that policy. So it doesn't matter how many city staff members are pro this or pro that or anti this or anti that. They can't actually influence policy or guide a city council to make a decision, because they literally can't. That's against the rules.
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, when I worked there for about a year, and there were people inside the planning department who were very much wanted bike infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure, and they worked on getting grants and so forth for different programs like Safe Routes to School, or maybe a grant for a bike lane, or bike stalls, I think was another thing they worked on. And there was resistance on the city council to this kind of idea. And maybe, you know, the people on staff shouldn't have been thinking like that, but it's just, that was there, that element was there to take advantage of. Whereas I would argue in Los Angeles, there aren't people in the background trying to make bike infrastructure happen, at least on the senior level. But in Burbank city planning, it seemed like a pretty friendly environment for it. It's just that there were people on the city council. I could name definitely one city council member who was conspiratorial about Agenda 21 and all this stuff. And he was working against anything that had to do with bikes and pedestrians and so forth. He just was a car type of guy, like you're kind of talking about, that Burbank does have. I guess I'm saying, like, how are you going to work with the city council to move forward more initiatives like this? What, like, is there do you have allies on the city council that you think you could link up with and get something going that would push more of the city of Burbank to be a bike friendly, pedestrian friendly place?
Well, I can work with my city council members when we have open meetings, and of course I can, challenge them on their ideas, and they can challenge me on mine. We can have that robust debate then. But if it has to come to that, we've already lost. The reason I point out that city staff and other governmental staff members can't do that during their work hours is because there are places that people can do it. Most notably, the Burbank Transportation Commission. So the Transportation Commission is not staff. They are appointed members people who are volunteers from the city, and they're appointed by the city council. And so what the city council does is, hey, us 5 members of the city council, we may not know everything about transportation. So we're going to find 7 people who are experts on this, appoint them to a board or a commission and say, hey, look, the 7 of you, you also meet once a month. You debate the ideas, you discuss what's happening, and then give your recommendations and opinions to us. And then we will take that into consideration with much more weight than simply a non-biased city staff report. So we get both. And so for me, one of the strongest things I can do is make sure good people are appointed to that transportation commission. So I'm encouraging as many people as I can. Hey, if this is something you're passionate about, this is something you're experienced in, there's 2 seats right now open on that 7-member board. That's a huge amount of people ready to go. One of the seats, of course, is mine because I had to leave now that I'm on city council. So I'm actively looking for my replacement. But what I tell people is, look, that's the place to do it. Don't yell at city staff. They're going to do their job. And if I say, let's go with a green light to bike infrastructure, and I can get 2 other council members to say yes, they're ready to move. But also, well, I want to say one last thing. City staff members, they're bound by that rule during work hours. There are a lot of people who work for the city who do extra stuff in their volunteer time, who are politically active, who work behind the scenes. And as long as they're not at their desk and running on business time, they can do whatever they want to during their free time. And in fact, I was endorsed by the Burbank City Employees Union because the union members, like the people who work for the city, they know what I'm pushing for. And they had a vote and they told their union, look, get this guy in office because he's going to support us to do the work we need to do.
So, but you do have support in the city council because you were able to shut down or adopt your proposal for shutting down San Fernando Boulevard for pedestrian only.
Yes, absolutely. So I will tell you, I know Don mentioned earlier that there used to be a city council member who was against all this, and I'm guessing, I think I know who it is, and he got replaced by somebody.
Yeah, I heard that he did lose. He lost an election, right? Or did he just retire? I forget.
Yes, he lost an election, and there was a bunch of other factors involved, but the person who won is very much a bike walk friendly type of council member. And
very cool.
Yeah, and so the conversation is changing.
Tell us about the San Fernando Road. What are we bringing the Golden Mall back? Like, what's going on here?
All right, so I cannot comment on what is coming before the city council, if it's going to be a proposal yet, but I can tell you what I've done in the past. I can simply state facts. During my first run in 2017, the entire time I was on the Transportation Commission for 3.5 years, and during my last run in 2020, I was a huge advocate for the return of the Golden Mall. And for those of you who don't know, in 1968, the San Fernando Boulevard, downtown San Fernando in Burbank, was shut down from, I believe, Orange Grove, possibly even further to Angelino, but for just a few blocks up to Magnolia, just along San Fernando. So Angelino, Orange Grove, Olive, Palm, all the way to Magnolia Boulevard had pedestrian only. There was grass, there was parks, there was public restrooms, there was eating space, like you could just sit down and have dinner at a picnic table. And it was just such a lovely open air sort of promenade kind of feel. It lasted 20 years. In the 1980s, we had a really hard economic collapse in Burbank. The biggest employer, Lockheed Martin, left. And there was a bunch of other, factors. Suburban life in the United States in the 80s took a big hit after the late 70s recession and all of that stuff. But Burbank never really recovered as fast as other places. And so one of the things that they thought to do for economic recovery was to open that up again so people could drive downtown and shop. People were very much about driving. Suburban life was coming back in the late 80s, and people wanted their 2.5 kids to pack them in a van and drive to the ice cream shop and then drive to the mall and then drive to soccer. That was a huge thing. So they tore up the Golden Mall. They opened up the street back again, and it is now, it's as regular street as it is. But one of the proposals we got passed at the Burbank Transportation Commission, I believe at the beginning of last year, was the Complete Streets Plan, and it's a huge document about walkability, bikeability, how we do canopies on our streets, and the way we do crosswalks and all of that stuff. But locked deep in that document was a 3-stage process of turning San Fernando Boulevard into a one-way street, and then moving it into a one-lane one-way street, and then finally, after 5 years, turning it into pedestrian only, like as a 3-step process to see if we could do that. And when the pandemic hit, we needed outdoor dining. And thankfully, that Complete Streets Plan had already been approved by City Council back in March. So it was very easy for city staff to come back to the council and say, hey, you just approved this. Can we jump to step 3 and shut everything down and open the street up for outdoor dining? And thankfully, the City Council, who had adopted that Complete Streets Plan, also said, okay, let's do this in favor of our restaurants. I was glad that we pushed for it, because if not, we would have been out of luck, and a lot of restaurants in Burbank would have been hurting. And so, thankfully they went forward with it. It did open up. We closed the street we opened the street up to driving again during the latest shutdown hours, because there was no outdoor dining allowed anyways. But tonight at midnight, I believe, the county has said we can open back up for outdoor dining, because they said that is safe again. So we're going to shut it down one more time. And then this weekend, hopefully by Monday, I think is the final date because of the rain and all of that, we're going to go back to outdoor dining with I think we're going to go down to 1 or 2 lanes maybe with traffic, but no parking. Like, all the parking is going to stay outdoor dining. We'll see what happens in the future. If we can, if the city council wants to shut it all down again and keep it all Golden Mall style one more time, we don't know.
Yeah, because one of the ideas is that if you give people these things, then they get to experience it, and they're not going to want to let it go.
Yeah, if you've been following on social media is filled with people who are just cheering Golden Mall, Golden Mall, Golden Mall.
That's so funny. I went to school at a Catholic school nearby, and so the Golden Mall was on the bus route for me to get back home. And so that it was dead. It was totally dead at the time. I mean, it wasn't. There was the comic book shop and the Dungeons and Dragons shop, the little record stores and all this stuff, but it was really sleepy. We would skate all the stuff in there, all the fountains that were empty. So it'd be rad to see that come back. I was kind of bummed when I found out that they took that out, because it was just such a cool little place.
Well, yeah, that's going to be good to see what you can do with that. And you also, I read in the same interview that I found out about you in on Streets Blog LA, that you were saying that we need to connect your bike paths with LA and Glendale, and you need to execute the bicycle master plan.
Thankfully, that was actually approved right after I won my election, so I really don't have to work too hard on that one anymore. But yeah, there are places in Burbank where, like, you'll just be biking, and there's a great lane, and there's a whole thing set up, and then you'll just get to the end of it, and it doesn't start up again for another quarter mile, and you're like, well, where do I go? And so you're dodging traffic and bobbing and weave. It's such a weird, like, there's only like 3 or 4 missing connections, but it really slows you down, especially if you're trying to get pretty far. If you're trying to commute on a bike, it's really tough.
What are they going to do with the new Burbank Bridge? Because I know one issue with Burbank is it's bifurcated by the 5 freeway, and for some reason, I can't think of one bike connection across the 5 freeway on any of the bridges. But are they going to do something with Burbank? Is that finally going to have some kind of connection between, I guess you call it like North Burbank and South Burbank over the 5?
So there is a plan in place to demolish and rebuild all three of the bridges, Burbank, Magnolia, and Olive. I believe Olive is next up. The Burbank Bridge, hopefully, if they can find the money, apparently Caltrans ran out of money and now they want Metro to pick up the tab.
Real sidebar, real quick. Is that something that you guys vote on? Like, do you have any power to change that request from Caltrans? No effect on that?
We can write a letter. We can yell at them all day. But at the end of the day, that's a budgeting issue between Caltrans and wherever they can get it. And if Metro is, Metro already pays for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah, that shouldn't happen. This should not happen. Caltrans should starve sometimes.
Yeah. And just as a private citizen, and this is not in my council member hat at all, as a private citizen and resident of the great state of California, Caltrans is arguably one of the most bureaucratically poorly run and just
evil. Let's just say evil.
Like willfully ignorant on stuff. And it really bothers me that it's been around for so long and there's just no transparency, no democratic process to it. The rules and guidelines set up are, 50 years old.
Totally.
It was designed to maintain car culture, right? That the original intent of Caltrans was how many freeways can we build and how many cars can we pack onto those roads? And
it's basically like the federal money kind of created Caltrans, right? Like there was that, I forget which president it was, but they had like the National Highway Transportation Fund or something like that. And they they injected a bunch of money into California and Caltrans and kind of created this monster. And now the money is sort of evaporating on the federal level. And you've got these these state departments of transportation that are just gobbling up so much money. And now they're trying to, like, that whole thing with Metro, that tax, the Measure R and Measure M. I mean, we're paying to upgrade Caltrans property, like freeways. Like, why are we doing that? That's like, they should be paying for that.
Yeah. And it's a problem in my eyes because of the lack of democratic accountability in their organizing structure. If we look at, say, the federal government and all of those, every time a new president comes in, he's able to really change the staff. And anytime a new Congress shows up, they can really vote on a lot of big things. But Caltrans was designed in a way to have a singular mission, which was pack as many cars onto freeways as you can. Once the idea of freeways is no longer viable, we don't need to build any more freeways. And yet we are asking a company that is designed to build freeways to simply, now let's maintain and upgrade the roads we do have and the freeways we got for other uses and better infrastructure. It's just not designed to do that. And so we're trying to take this archaic function of this, state body and trying to repurpose them. But we're not taking the time to change the state body. We're saying, oh, no, their internal mechanisms and structures are fine. Let's just use them on something else. It's like trying to turn a hammer into a screwdriver. It's not going to work. It's not. You got to fundamentally change the internal mechanisms and structure of how Caltrans are. That's a whole different operation.
And there's a ton of people, senior staff in a lot of these departments of transportation that have just been there for decades, and that's what they were taught. They were taught the cars were the future, everybody's going to drive everywhere for everything. And they're still there decades later, and they're in senior positions, and it's like, all right, when are they going to retire? Let's get some new thinking in here too,
Yeah.
I, as a bike pedestrian advocate, maybe I'm just being biased, but it's just like cars create a lot of, right now they burn a lot of fossil fuel. They use a lot of the Earth's resources. They're expensive. And we've designed our environment for this. And it just seems to me that there isn't enough messaging through the media that this is a big problem, that our transportation system, expects everyone to drive everywhere for everything. That's the way it's designed now. And it's like, I don't hear enough messaging through the media that this condition itself is bad. You know, it's I think you were kind of talking about this earlier, but it's like a lot of people hear like climate change, and it's sort of this concept that they can't really wrap their heads around because they don't see it right in front of their faces. And
it's true. It's true. I'm afraid right wingers are going to find this podcast and just edit it to say that I'm advocating to ban all cars, and all they're going to see is that clip, ban all cars.
So wait, Konstantine Anthony, what you're saying is ban all cars. Okay, that's interesting.
So what we need to do fundamentally as a society is understand that a car has its place, but it doesn't have as many places as people think it does. And there are
it's like with the Golden Mall. It's like that design, it's technically illegal in a lot of municipalities because there isn't enough parking spaces. So, it's like Los Angeles is suffering from this, where we have this policy with parking requirements that you have to build a parking lot that's basically bigger in size than the retail space of the establishment. So you end up with these like fast food restaurants with a donut of parking around them. And that means that you basically induce people to drive more because you spread everything out. With the Golden Mall, I mean, there was shops like all along both sides of the street. It's actually a wonderful thing as a young person to go to have lunch there, and then you're going to the comic book store, and there was like things to do, and you didn't have to have a car to do it. And we've designed our society now that, especially like out in the San Fernando Valley, or which Burbank is part of, you are basically forcing people to have to drive, and that's causing traffic. It's using a lot of resources. It's contributing to climate change. I feel like there needs to be more hard-hitting language about this somehow through the messaging isn't really getting out there. I don't know why, but it's like,
well, I mean, parking minimums are like the bane of my existence when it comes to zoning, and it's just ridiculous. And you're right. I mean, fast food restaurants, it's so hilarious to me how you can drive by 100 fast food restaurants and there's so much parking and everyone's in the drive-through anyways.
That's true.
What are we doing?
I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
Or even just like I think there's sort of an encouragement to have a drive-through, in the same way that like bars can open if they get a valet and park cars off site. They get an exemption to get their liquor license. It's the same way and that sort of induces driving to the bar, which is ridiculous. Why would you want people to drive to the bar and then drive after they're drinking? But with these fast food restaurants, I think there's also like some kind of an exemption in there or some kind of benefit to having a drive-through. Like, why do they? I mean, I guess it's just economically benefiting. Just people just want the convenience. It's just crazy.
It's convenience. That's what it's about. It's convenience.
Yeah. Okay.
But the issue is, here's the thing. The reason people are driving to the fast food establishment is because there's not one near their house. If you just simply build stuff where the people are, nobody's going to drive there. I used to live behind a Jack in the Box. 90% of my meals were Jack in the Box because I could walk there. So like, it was a Jack in the Box behind residential property. Everyone in that neighborhood ate at that Jack in the Box, and then 2 miles away there was a Taco Bell. Everyone in that neighborhood ate at that Taco Bell. Like, you got to build things where the people are so they don't have to drive. What we've done with this society is split it up: commercial here, residential there.
Do you guys? The city council has the power to change the zoning, right? Like, can we?
Council
That's a big deal. But
the way our government is set up, and kudos to the founding fathers for separating this. Land use designation has, the state, the county, the federal government can't tell you how to do your zoning to a degree, but 99% of those decisions are done by your city council. So what we build and where we build it, 99% of that decision is done by your local elected members. People don't think about that. They only vote once every 4, maybe even 8 years for president, thinking, oh, the president is going to sit in the White House and he's going to affect my paycheck, my commute to work, where I work, where I buy a house. None of that is done by the federal government. They'll help you with your loan. They'll tax your income once you get a job. But where you find those economic opportunities and where you spend your money, 99% of that decision is made by your city council. So people have to get involved locally.
Do you have a list of initiatives you're going to start working on within the city council? Do you have a plan of how long do you get, first of all? And
it's a 4-year term.
Okay.
And I don't have a list. I don't have a list of stuff that I'm working on. I have a list of things that I ran on that are going to help guide my policy decisions. However, there is a local movement right now happening in Burbank, and it's called the Burbank Green New Deal. And it's happening. Yeah, it's happening now. And there's a lot of local members working on it. And these are people who aren't in office, who aren't in any elected position or even appointed position. There are some commission and board members who are assisting with language and stuff like that. But for the most part, it's just young kids like Sunrise Movement and some, moms and dads in the neighborhoods who are active in environmental policy and advocacy. And they're working to bring forth a huge list of proposals and have us, the city council, vote on it as just a giant package of ordinances. So it's actually law, not just simply, well, we're going to try to do this, or we're going to try to hard coded into our city ordinances what you can and cannot do for the future of climate change. And I think it's going to be great. One of the other things that's happening at the exact same time that this is happening is a tax Amazon campaign. So Amazon is in Burbank, and one of the things that there's another group of
where are they moving to? What's the
just
site?
North of the Burbank airport. They're gonna take up.
That makes sense.
I think it's 16 acres, 700,000 square feet. It's huge. They're going to do a distribution center north of Burbank Airport.
Now, do you see this as a good thing or?
Good, bad. I don't really like Amazon as a company, but it's their right to operate in business wherever they want to do business. Yeah. But if there's a group of citizens who are saying, hey, there's a big company who is known for treating their workers poorly and not treating the environment really well, moving into a city, and a city can tax those kinds of corporations. Hey, Green New Deal people, if you want to be able to pay for these ordinances and that you're presenting to city council, here's your opportunity. So these two movements are working, at the same time. And at some point, they're going to start to coalesce and people are going to understand, just like what I was talking to Lindsay before, there are people who can pay to have these green policies put in place. Why aren't we taxing these big corporations to pass environmental policy to make these changes happen?
And can we talk about what you think they might come up with, as far as there's a
lot of stuff. There's a lot of stuff on the table for the environmental policy stuff.
Yeah, I was curious. Is there like a template Green New Deal out there? Do they have it fairly defined? Is there a Green New Deal manifesto somewhere?
I imagine at some point there's going to be. If people really want to, they can start. Just go on the internet. You can see people talking about it. You can get in touch with folks.
Yeah, I've never really seen like a actual policy document of this is the Green New Deal. If you support the Green New Deal, here is the manifesto or whatever you want to call it.
From what I hear, and some people have reached out to me, and also there's a document that has been passed around internally through city planning and public works and Burbank Water and Power. It's not ready for public consumption yet because they said it was still in process. But it looks like there's about 20 to 25 different ordinances that this group wants the city to pass. And it's little stuff like
this is Burbank specific.
Banning gas leaf blowers, like, the gas powered leaf blowers.
Oh my God. There's a place where you can get conservatives and progressives to agree on the same thing, I think.
Exactly. And then there's big stuff like 100% renewable energy by 2030, by the end of the decade. That's a big thing, to try to do an entire city and say we're not using any coal, any natural gas, no fossil fuels by the end of this decade. So like there's big
Wait,
stuff.
now isn't that a power plant right there off the LA River with the 4 smokestacks right at what is it, Olive, or maybe it's Magnolia? There's like,
we have the Magnolia plant is right on between Olive and Magnolia.
Yeah,
right off the 5.
Is that a coal burning plant?
It's been switched to natural gas.
Okay.
But it's still fossil fuel.
Wow. And okay, so that's interesting how they control the emissions from that. I mean, it's right in the middle of the city. So.
Yeah. I mean, natural gas does burn a lot cleaner than coal.
Cleaner, yeah.
It's not zero emissions.
Yeah.
And, you run it every single day, 24/7, 365 days a year, it starts to add up. And
were you endorsed? Did you get endorsed by the Cusimano family at all?
No, I did not.
No.
In fact, they were busy campaigning against
the
ordinance I wrote for rent control. So.
Oh my God. I went to school with one of the Cusimanos. I know they have a lot of influence over there. Okay. Maybe I should.
I've talked to them. I know the family. I've talked to them about this kind of stuff. And surprisingly, they're on board with some of these issues. They're not against, bikes and banning leaf blowers.
I want to talk to I was in class with Julie Cusimano, who she was super cool. I feel like I could just be like, yo, this is Don, remember me? Hey, bikes are rad. Why not get on board? You guys have a lot of influence over there. Like, what can we do?
Reach out, have her give me a call, have her shoot me an email.
Yeah, I think I wanna like at least try this. I know that I can get in touch with her, so this could be fun. But I feel like, like she's our age, like, I mean, she could be like, why wouldn't she be on board with like pedestrianizing, making Burbank a bike-friendly place and working on climate change? That's amazing.
I mean, this is cool stuff, man. This is like happening stuff, and the more people we get
it makes
involved,
sense. Yeah.
Now, over the summer, I took an oath not to take any fossil fuel money, but I also took an oath not to take any real estate money, because one of the problems as a city council member is you have a lot of people who own real estate, landlords, developers, realtors, and they have a lot of business with the city. It's especially with regards to like zoning and land use. There's a lot of money tied up in those businesses. And so for me, to be able to make decisions clearly and not biased, I said, look, if you work in real estate, you can vote for me all you want. You can endorse me all you want. I'm just not taking your money. So I didn't.
You're a good man. And I'm not talking about contributions. I'm talking about just changing a little bit of the political tide over there. Like, they have a lot of influence. There's got to be a way to transform at least the younger generations of that particular political influence. I don't know.
I'm rooting for the Green New Deal and the Sunrise people.
It's a good side to be on.
Yeah. Well, Konstantine, thank you for coming on the show. We appreciate you staying on for the full hour, and we want to keep in touch and keep updated on what's going on in the city of Burbank, and with the Sunrise Movement to that extent that you're involved. But Burbank, I used to just I didn't like Burbank, I guess, because I went to school there or whatever, and the cops were always just like kind of jerks to skateboarders and stuff. But the more that I look at it as I get older, I'm like, Burbank is like, it is a well-managed city. It seems like it does do things that are small town and pedestrian and bike friendly. And there are people in the planning department that have a good head on their shoulders. And now I'm glad to see that you've gotten onto the city council, because I've heard, in the past there's been some controversial people on the city council.
Well, hold on now. I am controversial, so
I should put it controversial to the green movement, or how should I say? But anyways, I'm glad that you're on there, and we want to get more updates in the future. We want to have you back on the show, so you're welcome anytime to come back, and we'll definitely reach out to you when we want to get some info on Burbank.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate, the message you guys are putting out there, and the fact that you're talking about this stuff.
So give us some social media links or email or something to get in contact with you. So if any listeners out there want to follow this or get in touch with you.
Sure. I'm all over Facebook. You can find me there as Councilmember Konstantine Anthony. I'm on Twitter and Instagram as Konstantine in CA. That's for California, Konstantine in CA. And I post all the time. I retweet stuff. I have fun. There's a lot of banter. I still am, I guess, a comedian for 20 years. So I have a lot of fun on my social media. So if you don't think I won't react or interact with you on social media, you might be surprised.
All right. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for being on the show, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much. Have a good night.
Transportation shows I care. Every turn of the pedal cleans the air. Greener than green, I'm saving the planet. Just like my friends Dale, Sean, Toby, and Janet. No greenhouse gas, a tiny carbon footprint up your ass. I'm on a motherfucking bike. I'm on a motherfucking bike.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Bike Talk. If you want to hear more, go to kpfk.org, navigate to programs, and choose Bike Talk. On the Bike Talk page, click on the archives link to play or download shows posted in the last 4 months. Go to biketalk.com and copy or click on the RSS link to subscribe. Our Twitter handle is BikeTalkPFK. On Facebook, we are Bike Talk. You can become friends and join our group.